Okay, well, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. And hello and welcome to the annual LexisNexis event series here in Canberra. Thank you all for taking the time out of your busy schedules to come here today. I haven't been outside, but I heard somebody say earlier on it's a little cold outside, so hopefully it'll stay warm and inviting and comfortable in here. My name's Simon Wilkins. I'm the Managing Director of LexisNexis Australia. I'm the facilitator here today for this panel and group discussion titled Legal Frontiers from AI to Ethics. This is the fourth year that we've run an event series such as this with the aim of really facilitating some discussion in the legal services community. And this year we're looking to uncover some perspectives on the current impacts of technology, including AI, on what we see as a rapidly changing legal industry. In fact, we talk in our business about how we're going to see more change through legal technology in our industry in the next 3 years than we've seen in the last 30. Many of you, I hope, will know us, will know LexisNexis already, but please indulge me in just giving you a few minutes on us and what we do. So we've been in business in one shape or form globally for over 200 years, and we have a long-standing history of innovation within the legal industry. Traditionally, I think you'll know us as a provider of legal content, but now we see ourselves fast evolving into what we call an information analytics business. And indeed, I've just returned from the Silicon Valley, where 200 senior leaders from LexisNexis got together with entrepreneurs and startups in the Valley, and we didn't feel too out of place, which was a good feeling. But as time has gone by, we've seen the way in which our space, the legal services industry, and how your lawyers utilize content has changed. First, from the obvious transition from hard copy to digital and online, but now we're seeing more complex demands come our way that offer what we think is quite interesting possibilities. In the US, we acquired businesses such as Lex Machina, Revell Law, and IntelliGize. And these are businesses that help extract quantitative insights from huge data sets and provide lawyers with information they need to make decisions faster and more effectively than ever before. And in Australia, we've developed off-the-shelf data analytics and visualization solutions, such as the High Court Analyzer that some of you will know, or the Court of Appeal Analyzer, but also we see the demand for more customized analytics solutions coming our way that really harness the power of Australian content to quickly surface connections and information for intelligence or litigation or commercial insights. And this is information that would have taken hours and hours to uncover without the power of AI or data analytics. And some of you will know the Lexis Advanced platform. That platform really has the power to surface more than a petabyte of data, more data actually than there is on Wikipedia. And we enhance Lexis Advanced regularly, as you would any good software platform, with incremental improvements driven by a whole army of engineers and UX specialists and data specialists and developers. And the platform itself uses machine learning and natural language processing to analyze content and surface that based upon elements such as semantic similarity, meaning that the information you need is more accessible and again faster and more easily used than ever before. But we appreciate we're just one player in this space, a fast-moving space, quite an exciting space, and there are countless legal tech businesses now around. In fact, there are organizations really making some interesting waves. There were 787 legal startups in 2018 globally, 36 of which were in Australia alone. This compares to a global number 8 years ago, of only 17 legal startups. So you can see how fast things are moving. So it's exciting to be part of the conversation, and we're really pleased to be in that. And hopefully you'll get a little bit of value over the next hour and 15 minutes or so Mostly I would think from the opinions from our panellists rather than hearing me speak. So as we get underway, just a bit of housekeeping. And if you didn't already know, the toilets are out there, straight behind us there. If you can't understand the symbols, the gents' toilet is on the right. It took me a while to work that one out. Please join us and use the free Wi-Fi if you'd like to. It's QT event and the password is great event. Make sure that you use the capitals there for great and event. And if you are using Twitter, and maybe some of you will be, we'll be live tweeting during the session today. Hashtag AI2Ethics18, hashtag, which you can see at the bottom of the slide there. Okay, so before we get into the topics themselves, I just wanted to take a few minutes to introduce the panelists. And if you wouldn't mind just keeping your applause for the panelists till at the end of the introduction, that would be terrific. All right, so let's start first with Aaron Taranto. Aaron is an in-house legal counsel at QBE Insurance. Aaron is a commercial lawyer and business designer with a passion for innovation and digital. In his spare time, Aaron designs websites, brands, and strategy. And by combining these professional and creative disciplines, Aaron aims to create value for new and transforming enterprises. Prior to QBE Insurance, Aaron worked as a litigation lawyer at Greg Walsh. Next to Aaron is James Mackay, who's the Executive Director at GovLaw Tech. James has over 15 years of experience in Canberra in legal, public administration, and technology implementation roles. And James' extensive and deep administrative law and systems expertise and legal background provides a unique skill set for agencies and organizations seeking to improve policy implementation of accurate, transparent, and complex enterprise-wide decision-making. And then finally, we're also joined by Sean Tenby, who is a partner of dispute resolution and litigation at Maddox. Sean has specialized in the area of commercial disputes for nearly 20 years. He's acted for numerous consumer markets and franchising clients, helping him gain deep expertise in franchising and consumer law-related dispute resolution and litigation. Sean is also passionate about the role that legal technology can play in responding to challenges and disruption currently facing the legal sector. And he's also the head of innovation at Maddox. So please join me in welcoming our panel. Thank you. Okay, so I'd like to just introduce the discussion that we're going to have by playing a quick video, which hopefully is going to work, Max.
My son? God, he looks just like me. Within 2 hours of his arrest, Martin McFly Jr. was tried, convicted, and sentenced to 15 years in the state penitentiary. Within 2 hours?
The justice system works swiftly in the future now that they've abolished all lawyers.
This is heavy.
Oh, it gets worse. Next week, a daughter attempts to break him out of jail. She gets sent up for 20 years.
My daughter? Wait, I have a daughter.
All right, so back in 1989, when they made Back to the Future 2, Doc Brown was referencing a world in 2015 where there were no more lawyers. Although, if you remember the film, there were hoverboards, which I thought were really cool. But here, in real time, in 2018, I think we can all agree that lawyers are far from being abolished. But I think as AI and automation makes inroads into legal services, maybe what we have to think about more is the way lawyers work and how that might have to change in the future. Because I think with this new opportunity comes some added responsibility. Ethical questions related to the growing use of technology abound. As tech becomes more complex, so too will its relationship with people, and new rules may need to be developed for this new frontier. So over the next hour or so, we'll explore a number of key areas, from data protection to things like algorithmic bias. We've got a lot of ground to cover. And we might only scratch the surface of some of these topics in this discussion this afternoon, but we'll endeavour to do so and do topics justice and certainly ensure that our presenters are given the opportunity to share their opinion. So let's get the discussion underway. Just a couple of things to note. We're going to be using live polling through the session today. So if you came along last year, you might remember this. What you really need to do is grab your mobile phones, because this is the way that this works, and just enter a browser and put in that address, polllev.com/LexusOz. and then you should immediately get into our live polling. It's totally anonymous, so don't worry, whatever you say isn't going to be tracked to you, and you don't need to log in or do anything as you go along. This gives you the opportunity to respond to some questions as we go today, but in terms of questions too, if you hear something from the panel today that you wanted to chime in on, you've got a question about, that you felt that the moderator didn't do a good enough job of diving into, please raise your hand or shout out, and we would love to hear your question. Okay, so let's start by talking a little bit about a topic that we talk about often in sessions such as this, and that's the reality for young lawyers nowadays and what that might look like in the kind of 5 to 10 year view. And I'd like to get some opening comments from our panelists on this one, and as I say, this is always a nice segue into this area because I think we'd all agree this is an area that's changing rapidly. So maybe I'll go to you first, Sean, on this. And do you think that technology has created opportunity for young lawyers or made it more difficult for them in the short term?
In the short term?
Or the long term?
Look, there's no doubt that technology is impacting the way that we practice. We use technology-assisted review for large-scale discoveries. We use artificial intelligence for large due diligences. We outsource now a lot of our doc review to doc review centre offshore. All of that is possible through technology, and that is impacting the work which would traditionally have been done by people sitting in our office generally. That work is either now being done by computers or is being done by people elsewhere. So yes, that is definitely impacting the way that people work. But I guess the flip side of that is that on a discovery, it used to be when I started, it's actually nearly 25 years, you'd say that I'm in litigation and you'd say to the client, bring in your files. And they used to bring in a couple of manila folders. Maybe if it was a big matter, they brought in a box of manila folders. Now, just the other day we were dealing with a discovery with over 800,000 pieces of data that we had to try and work out how we were going to, look at that data and review it and analyse it and work out what was relevant to our litigation or not. So yes and no. So definitely some of the work that was traditionally being done by lawyers is now being done by computers or elsewhere. But also the amount of work that is available means that it has been offset. So that's a bit of a wishy-washy answer. What I would say, because occasionally I'm asked, would you, if your best friend said my child is thinking about becoming a lawyer now, would you recommend they do so? I would say no one. And the reason for that is that technology is just one of the forces that is impacting the large commercial law firm environment. That's the environment I've been in for 25 years. And we can probably, we'll be talking about this throughout the course, so I'm not going to deal with all of it, but we are about to go through in the next, probably not 5 years, but 5 to 10 years, where the model of the large commercial law firm is going to radically change. And the legal environment will radically change. So would I recommend to anyone that they invest all of that time and money in the law degree to go into an industry that is going to be subjected to so much change? No one.
Thanks, Sean. James, what's your view on this subject?
Well, I guess I'm probably the only non-lawyer in the room, even though I've did a law degree. I kind of got out having seen, I did it as my second degree, and I saw all of my colleagues from when I left school sort of giving up their lives as sausages in a sausage factory at a big corporate law firm, and I certainly wasn't prepared to give up my 20s to that end, so I stayed around at university and did a law degree, and then worked out that what I actually wanted to do was be involved in trying to make law redundant, and ended up working in a technology space where I guess, and working in this town, which is its main job really as a government town, which houses a lot of agencies, which make an awful lot of administrative decisions around people's lives and entitlements and that sort of thing, is basically attempting to make the operation of law invisible to those clients, to those citizens, and to make it run seamlessly, accurately, and all of those sorts of things. So in saying that, I kind of echo Sean's advice. I have recently been involved in teaching at ANU courses in legislative drafting and technology and IT law. Well, I was involved in marking a whole bunch of papers recently, exam papers recently, one of which was, will the law profession profoundly change in the next 5 years because of the advent of AI? And there was a profound stream of anxiety running through those students' papers, and I can empathise with that. So what I would like to say is, I think there's an awful lot of opportunity for young sort of people who are studying law to think more creatively about the application of law, and to come and work for companies like mine. And I sort of touch again on your observation about the growth in sort of legal startups and things. That's where the interesting things going to, that's where the innovation is going to happen. That's where the disruption to the bigger firms is going to happen, and it's whether those bigger firms are able to be alive to investing in those opportunities or adopting those opportunities is going to be really a key to survival, as it is for I think any business really. The great companies and firms of the past have been able to reinvent themselves, reinvent their business models, and so forth as technology changes. Some wither and die when they're not responsive to that. And I think it's the ability of those firms to be able to see those opportunities and to be innovative about their business models that I think are going to change the whole operation and the whole sort of concept of what a law firm does for people, or what a law firm can potentially do for people. And we can talk a bit about that later, I'm sure.
Thank you. And Aaron, again, your thoughts, and maybe thoughts as well around, I don't know, what do you see as the kind of disruptive technologies that are now emerging in this space that law graduates and law firms just need to be aware of? What's going to really disrupt this space?
I mean, I've been saying for a long time, and I'll give you a plug right off the
Thank you. Money's coming your way.
For LexisNexis is my go-to tool at work. I really can't see anything on the peripheral in Australia at the moment that sort of matches the quality and variety that you have. There's a few places in the US which are dabbling with smart contracts and blockchain technology. I find them interesting, but I think it's a long way off. There's one there which has a solution online for calculating federal income tax and automatically deducting that. And ultimately, I think that we're probably ripe for disruption. How far away that is, I'm not sure, because you've got the courts and the older generation on the one hand. I know when I was a criminal lawyer, one of my gripes was not even being able to print at the courts, and so you're in the middle of a criminal trial and you've got to find an internet cafe so that you can print off 14 copies of something. And so, the most basic, from my perspective, the most basic things make a big difference. But I think I'm the youngest one on the panel. I'm 31. I've been practicing now for 5 or 6 years. I've sort of struggled with my career as a lawyer because I came from a creative business beforehand, and I ran my own business for 4 or 5 years, which taught me an enormous amount of branding, business modeling, operations, and really practical expertise that I've continually applied to the jobs that I've had. So when I was at Greg Walsh, I redesigned his website. It was very cheap, it was very effective, it was very efficient in the time that I was there, because I knew what his practice was and his personality and what he wanted to achieve with that. Now I'm lucky enough to have a job where I don't have billable hours, so I can really get involved in any projects that I want, and I can do so from both a legal advisory perspective, and within that I think that there's a real understanding of the systems and the broader environment. So it's a practical understanding of the systems that we use, the data that goes into those systems, how the system uses that data, and what we produce on the back end from the output. So, you know, I try to bring that practical guidance, and one of the things that I see as a problem as well is the multiple systems. You invest in this practice management system, and then you invest in this document management system, and then you invest in this legal database, and you have turnover of staff, and as soon as they get to realize the true benefits of that system, someone else comes in and they prefer a different system, and so then you're running dual systems. And so I think that there will be one which does multiple things and can tap into multiple different environments, like you know, court environments, or online databases, or your own precedent and template databases that will and do so in by way of cloud and connectivity.
Okay, thank you. We've got that product development idea now locked away somewhere. Before we just move off this subject of young lawyers, and I'll open this question up to anybody who would want to respond to it. Do we think we're seeing young lawyers now through university be given the skills that they need in order to be successful in the job as it stands today? I mean, there's a lot of talk about lawyers needing coding skills, for example, or project management skills, or you know, some things which are obviously a bit broader than just what we would see as kind of traditional lawyering. So, has anybody got a thought they want to share? Sure. Aaron, go ahead.
Sorry, I'd say absolutely not. Even the practical skills for a lawyer, I don't think they give you this real world, you know, expertise where you can hit the ground running. You know, and everyone's relatively mature by the time they graduate from law school, I'd say. And you know, I just think that the universities needed to do a lot more about, you know, the more practical, mundane tasks that you will be doing right off the bat. And yes, absolutely, computer science and law should be a thing. Coding, I wish I knew more code. I wish I knew how to code. Working with developers and project managers and being able to bring some sort of understanding of code and law together is I think it's going to be a huge competitive advantage.
Yeah, I suppose I can talk to that, because even though I'm not a developer, I work with a lot of developers, obviously, and I guess my company, my fellow director, did a law degree, became a tax advisor with PwC, then ended up working at a software company here in Canberra was called Soft Law, and then subsequently got acquired by Oracle. Of course, as soon as it got acquired by a big beast, it lost its kind of he lost his ability to pad around the office in his board shorts, and so we decided to start a company. And but just in the last couple of years, Soft Law, for the past 15 years, has been sponsoring a course at ANU Law School called Legislative Drafting and Technology. It's basically designed to, initially designed to identify and harvest potential recruits to its company, and because it just basically taught its software, which is a product now known as Oracle Policy Automation, which is, I would consider, like a second generation AI tool, sort of so-called expert system, where it doesn't self-learn. Obviously, it's a declarative system, but basically a decision tree modelling system. That course has continued to be taught at ANU. I've taught it for the last couple of years, and to Aaron's point, you get the whole gamut of sort of young lawyers who've got no idea about technology, completely fearful about it, to some incredibly impressive people. And I was telling these guys before that I had one brilliant student from Korea who's probably didn't have a great grasp of the English language, but he was far and away the best student. He completely modelled a whole raft of the Social Security Act and did it better than anyone, and in fact discovered a whole bunch of loopholes in something that was dear to students' heart, namely the payment of loss study. And it was certainly one of the principal reasons I stuck around and did a second degree in law, because it was the only course that got off study. But I immediately asked him, leveraging off the original course's intention, I asked him what he was doing over summer, because I wanted to get him to come and work for my business. And he said, I would love to, but I'm working for a German company that's sort of analysing millions and millions of MRI images of lung cancers in order to be able to predictively assess whether a tumour is benign or not. And I thought immediately, well, he's going to do far more for the global good doing that job than coming to work for me or being involved in the law. But he had a real interest and aspiration to apply his computer science skills and his interest in law to doing this stuff around semantic knowledge and machine learning. And so there are pockets of people who are young, really focused, and watch this space. They're going to be, and they're going to end up working for these tech startups. They're not going to be interested in going to work for a big law firm, and even using those tools like the e-discovery tools will bore them quite quickly. And quite frankly, in order to be able to harness that sort of vein of innovation, firms such as no doubt Sean's firm or others need to be able to create these pockets of opportunity to let that kind of sort of youthful entrepreneurship, I guess, have its head, because and that's always going to be a challenge in a big conservative law firm.
Yeah, and Sean, do you want to just come on that quickly?
Yeah, look, what I'd say, just picking up the comment and then maybe answering the question. We ran 3 innovation programs last year in our firm, one of which involved our grads and first years, and it quickly became apparent to us that even after only 6 months working in the firm, that we had crushed the creative spirit of our graduates. And they really did, and so you can imagine how successful our innovation program was with our partners who'd been practicing for 10 or 15 or more years. So I would agree with your comment on that, James. Getting back to the original question, I guess the question is, that universities would say, well, we're not here to prepare lawyers for commercial legal practice. We're here to teach them the law. But what that means for me as an employer in a large commercial law firm environment is that graduates are completely unprepared for what it is we need them to do. So, but no one tells you that 50% of your job as a commercial lawyer is sales. We are selling our services. We are, with every time we engage with the client, we have to deliver, appropriately in a way that impresses them and gets them to come back. So a big part of what we do, and no one teaches, law students that. A lot of them, because of the way that the law seems to be taught these days, they come up and a lot of them have forgotten basic principles from the stuff they started, the contract and taught that in university. A lot of the kids that I deal with now, or I shouldn't be sorry pejorative, but the younger people coming out of law school are, they lack some of those basic knowledge because of the way it's taught. They research things by way of Google search rather than necessarily approaching it in a really kind of methodical way, looking at the leading texts and, So, and then you've got legal process management, you've got, and having sufficient knowledge of tech as well. And so, no, I think law students are wholly unprepared for commercial legal practice at the moment in universities. If that is their goal, they are failing. But I think they would say it's not their goal. Okay,
so let's move into a space now thinking about maybe some of the things as practicing lawyers that are changing in terms of what's required. So in 2013, the ABA, the American Bar Association, in their revised model rules of professional conduct, stated that lawyers must be tech savvy in order to provide a competent representation to a client. And we don't currently have anything like those similar requirements in Australia, as far as I know. So in this emergence of AI and analytics and complex tech, is there a professional responsibility to just understand how the technology works a little bit differently? In fact, we're going to just open our first poll question, I hope, Max. Which again, somebody's answered it straight away. Maybe Max was doing that. Unless everybody is in agreement, absolutely. Do lawyers have a professional responsibility to understand the tech that they use? And again, this can take us in any direction, but obviously, whether it's about transparency or trusting the machine or whatever it might be. Aaron, do you want to kick us off on this one?
So, first of all, yes, I mean, at a basic level, you can't produce your fundamental work, being letter writing or other documents, without understanding the tech that you use. And if you really understand it, you can do those things in a much more efficient way. But there's also, I think that the next movement will be those people who truly understand what the tech is doing. For example, in large discovery programs, what's happening in the middle there, so that they can adduce evidence as to why certain documents were excluded or what the process was. More like an expert to say that this is what we did, these are the decisions that we made, and this is the start. This is the starting point, this is the ending point, and I can rationalize all of the outcomes because I know the law in this space and I know how we apply the tech to the law.
Sean, your thoughts on understanding the tech?
Well, look, it's funny, I have worked at places where partners will get their secretaries to print emails into hard copy, and they will read them in hard copy, and then when they are looking to respond to those, they get the secretary to come into their office, sit at their desk, and they walk backwards and forwards and dictate in the old way, like literally the way they used to do it, 30 years ago. And that still happens today. But I do believe that you have an obligation to keep up with what is happening in technology. I mean, that's an example of why you don't need to know how email works, and you don't need to know how Word works and things like that. But I think there is the next wave of technology around the analytics associated with technology-assisted review. And that's at least 15 years old in Australia, and is getting increasingly sophisticated. And there would be significant numbers of the profession and very good litigators who do not know the tools that are available to deal with large-scale discovery. Again, if you went, I know in both my last firm and this firm, when faced with large-scale discovery, the automatic response is to throw people at the problem. And when I say, well, hang on a minute, why don't we try using all of these analytical tools, and we will then be able to reduce the data set from 800,000 documents to 50,000 documents, and we'll do a manual page turn review for 50,000. And they're like, how are we going to do that? So I think at that point in time, you are failing your client. I think you have an obligation to bring those tools to assist your client to deliver justice in a way that is efficient and productive. And if you are not doing that, you are letting the client down. And that's just one example. I use that example because it's probably the most sophisticated area, the most developed area at the moment for the application of legal tech to what we do. But it is, we recently signed up to Luminance, which is one of the due diligence, AI tools for due diligence processes. There are others, but that is just going to increase. There are going to be more and more tools available to make the practice of law more accurate, because all the studies show that a computer properly organised, a computer review is more accurate than a manual review, even of experts, subject matter experts. But also it's going to be quicker and cheaper. So that's just one example. But if you are not across those things, I don't think you're doing the right thing by your client.
And so let's just dive into this area of kind of trust a little bit, if I could just explore that and take us into some other areas. And again, we might go to the next question. I'm sorry, I will want to comment, on this, I should do. Clearly, a large percentage of the audience here are in agreement that understanding tech's important. So let's go into this idea of trusting tech. And again, an area that's kind of interesting for me is this, the way AI plays in things such as chatbots. So it might seem trivial, but believe me, it is quite interesting that you have chatbots now giving legal information. But can we see a world where a chatbot would give legal advice, and we would trust that, or is it always would we see a situation where there would need to be human supervision of some description in order for AI, maybe not chatbot, maybe an avatar, maybe a trusted human face, who knows? But something like that we would see is happening in the future. James, if you're on that.
Well, I'm a big fan of chatbots, namely because we've just built one and it's proved amazingly successful. And what our little chatbot does, we did some work for the Department of Veterans Affairs. And if you're a veteran, you're making a claim for compensation for a particular disease or injury. There are these statutory instruments. There's about 600 of them covering every known disease or injury that can possibly be related in some way to service, and the applicant needs to meet one or more of those criteria in order to be eligible. Now, usually the veteran has got a very vague understanding of what's wrong with them. I've got a bung knee or a sore back. And what our chatbot does, and we just leverage like a off-the-shelf Microsoft Azure machine learning software thing, and we're able to very quickly match that person's injury to the applicable legislation. The department encouraged us to set it at a very high level of accuracy, i.e. 100%, and it's gone through a parallel processing thing where the claims assessors have been basically watching a stack of papers roll up. Meanwhile, our little robot's been making all of these, not decisions, but properly matching the applicable piece of legislation. Claims have shot up by 300% because veterans are finding it very easy to get to their, and there's this huge backlog of paper. In every instance, the chatbot has been 100% accurate in matching the injury or disease to the applicable law, and it's done it within seconds. And so where there's an area of, and I'm talking about, my area of I guess practice, for want of a better word, or where my business operates is in this huge plethora of very clear, objective decision making, but often involving incredibly complex subordinate legislation, of which there are rivers of it, unfortunately. And if you can somehow limit the application of the machine to that area of text in terms of legislation, you're actually going to end up with startlingly good results and startlingly accurate results, because your field of vision is appropriately narrow. But the end result of that is a good result, because you're ending up making more accurate, faster, more efficient decisions. You're, in the case of veterans, certainly, you're reducing stress on them. You're reducing the ability for the department to be able to respond more quickly to the claim. Means that, you know, their reputational liability is reduced, and the veteran's able to access their entitlements a lot quicker with less stress and less adverse potential outcomes. And so I think there's this huge area of where machines are going to be able to, I guess, do things at that low level that will make very accurate decisions that are going to be better than humans, and they're going to do it a lot quicker. Of course, as you move up the chain and you move up into, I guess, the edge cases, and it's the old 80-20 rule. If you can deal with 80% of your decisions incredibly accurately, and then suddenly, you know, we've got to deal with that 80% case, because that's what's going to deliver accurate legal decisions made by machines, developed initially by humans, but in a very defined area of text, which is the law and the statute. So I think there's huge scope for that kind of thing. Of course, I was telling these gentlemen before, this was enabled. There was a bill before the Parliament last year, basically enabling the Secretary to approve automated computer decision making. It coincided with the controversy about the Centrelink robo debt scandal, and I think Jackie Lambie, obviously with her veterans hat on, just was up in arms about this. The evidence shows that the veterans are getting a much better deal out of the machine than out of the bureaucrats who are sitting on piles of paper and basically manually going through stuff. So
thanks, James. Yeah, and just moving on, and I wanted to accelerate a little bit because we've got some other areas I want to just jump on into. So I'm going to move off this subject into another big subject now. So let's talk about privacy, or data privacy. Of course, it's just covered, you know, mass media coverage in this space recently, of course, a topic that I think would be of interest for a lot of people in Canberra, I'm sure. Data breaches and the reporting of data breaches are now becoming more and more common. I mean, who doesn't know about Cambridge Analytica as an example? But of course, recently we're all being asked to think about things like My Health Record. As an example, November the 15th opt-out, if you didn't remember the date, or not. And anyway, so just thinking about how data really plays out in this space is particularly interesting. But of course, that idea of data breaches or privacy also obviously does have, you know, some things to consider when we think about AI, and particularly what data and how, you know, machine learning needs data in order to do certain things. So, Aaron, can people consent to their data being collected without explicit knowledge of how it's going to be used? Is there a middle ground in this somewhere that you think might be the place to be?
So this is the topic that I feared most.
Okay.
So I'll start with this. There's a very interesting guy floating around the internet. His name is Jaron Lanier. He actually heads up the innovation department in Microsoft. And notwithstanding that, he tells everyone, get rid of your social media accounts. Says I'm not speaking for Microsoft from that point of view, but I think the trade-off for these free services like Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn is that you're necessarily consenting to them using your data. And what Jaron argues is that we need to fundamentally rethink the way that we use these services and the way that we contribute to content on the internet if we want to have personal protection and if we want to have economic benefits that aren't just going to what he describes as one or two computers being Facebook So, you know, I think it's a matter of watch this space. You know, I think the Cambridge Analytica thing, you know, I understand that there's a few sort of activist groups pursuing that, but, you know, can the normal citizen really have any rights of recourse there? I don't think so. You know, with the GDPR and all of the sort of opportunities for consumers to have access to data, I think it's a matter of watch this space. There's, again, a few tech firms over in the US. One's called Data Wallet, which is quite interesting. And I've had a lot of discussions about commercializing data and getting data from various companies, and how can you commercialize that? Well, my argument is that the data is only as valuable as what you want to do with it. So, you know, Woolworths knows a lot about me, my insurers know a lot about me.
That's, by the way, that's why Coles has gone into the insurance space.
Absolutely.
It was the missing piece of the puzzle about what they knew about their consumers. Because now they know about your pets, now they know about your car, your caravan, your holidays, all of those are part of the consumer picture they didn't have. They knew what you were buying, they knew when you were shopping, they knew what you were eating. That's why they've gone into insurance. Not because they really want to be in insurance, but because they want to know more about you.
And I mean, from an insurance perspective as well, that's the conversations I'm having at work is that, you know, our data scientists are put up on a pedestal at the moment, and if anyone is looking for a change of career, I say be a data scientist.
Yeah, in our business too, they absolutely command whatever salary they want.
Yeah, but you know, I think as lawyers we have an opportunity to truly understand a wide variety of subject matters, and use that knowledge not only in a litigation or advisory sense, but in a more commercial and practical sense, to say, you know, when we're asked to produce an advice or documents to the court, we're necessarily gathering a bunch of data. So let's now try to use that in more proactive rather than reactive ways.
Aaron, you mentioned the GDPR there. We have a poll question on the GDPR, which we'll jump to, but whilst we're doing that, I mean, Sean, I'll ask you this question. Do you think our privacy protections are good enough in Australia? Obviously, the GDPR was a major deal in Europe, but that's impact in Australia as well. I mean, what are your thoughts about this?
Well, no, we don't have a right to privacy in Australia. So unlike other jurisdictions, European Union and the United States, where there are bills of rights or similar instruments, we don't have that. You know, the privacy regime requires people to kind of self-manage and report where, so the Privacy Act sets up some privacy principles and, you know, your rights in relation to how your data is going to be held and used and treated and your access to it. Is it sufficient? It's sufficient for me, personally. You know, I'm reasonably comfortable with the fact that the various social media sites that I'm on are aggregating my data and using it for various research purposes and probably selling to other people. At an aggregated level, I don't care. When it's then used to target advertising towards me, if someone's going to send me advertising, I'd rather be something I want. So that doesn't worry me either. But I've opted out of my health because I don't think there are adequate protections around access by government and law enforcement to the health records at the moment. So, and I think most Australians, not everybody obviously, but most Australians would have similar kind of views around what is happening with their data. That would be my view.
Interesting enough, the audience certainly has a view that stronger protections are needed, and we will share all of this data, by the way. We will share this data when we're going to make sure that you see this at the end of the series of events that we have around the country. Similarly in Melbourne, where we were yesterday, we saw very similar responses in terms of...
Maybe just finishing off that point. So I'm happy with them selling my aggregated data, but I don't want them selling my data to the kind of Cambridge Analytica kind of situation. And that's where I think there's no protection at all. And Facebook's response was, well, everybody consented when they clicked yes and set up the site. But of course, for a lot of us, that was years ago, and the terms of usage have changed so many times. And who reads the terms of usage at the start, let alone all the variations? No one. So have we really consented? That was one of the questions you had at the start.
Yeah.
Is consent enough? And I think the answer is, from a legal point of view, they might try and suggest that this is clearly not. From a, does it pass the pub test? It clearly didn't.
Yeah.
Zuckerberg got completely hammered on it, and Cambridge Analytica died as a consequence. But should there be some other framework that sits across the top of that and protects us from our own laziness in doing it ourselves? Probably.
Yeah, and as technology evolves, what you're consenting to now, you may not be aware of what you're really consenting to in the future.
Yeah.
And let's talk about this idea now of kind of algorithmic bias, because I think this is a really interesting space. Just very quickly, last year when we talked about artificial intelligence in these events, we talked about AI being pervasive. We were trying to just get our message across to the dialogue going that AI isn't going away, this is a real game changer. And it's interesting now how the dialogue has moved in the last wee while around actually now let's think about what is the AI doing. In fact, let's get under the hood, let's understand the algorithm a bit. There's a book by a Harvard PhD graduate and data scientist called Cathy O'Neill, which is a book called Weapons of Math Destruction, where she makes the point that algorithms are just opinions embedded in code. And she rejects the idea that mathematics is objective. She says that mathematical models serve to replicate biases and frequently reinforce discrimination. She's got a compelling argument. It is interesting. If you want to see how algorithms work, just Google 3 white teenagers and see what images you get when you Google that, and then Google 3 black teenagers and see what images you get when you Google that, and you'll see how the algorithm there driving that search result is using data to produce those images, and you'll see what I mean. So the fundamental idea of algorithmic bias is that algorithms are fed basic training data, and they use that data to reinforce things, and sometimes they'll reinforce biases. Algorithms in Australia, as many people will know in this space, they're already being used in the legal system in decision making around the risk of recidivism, bail decisions, criminal profiling. Again, I think we're seeing them. We're talking about mixed results coming from that space. Critics are saying they reinforce bias. Proponents are saying it's removing the subjective human reasoning piece in this. So it's a big question. And it's one I think we want to spend a few minutes on. So I'm going to just throw to James straight away on this. And what do we think? Algorithms, friend or foe? Does it bring equality and fairness in the law?
Yeah, well, I think you sort of touched on the key issues there, and that is these artificial intelligence and machine learning systems can only work on the basis of the data that they have, and so if there is an inherent bias, I don't know whether anyone was like me. I was on my way to tennis the other night, was listening to the law report on Radio National, where they're talking about using some kind of rudimentary AI to sort of work their way through potential employment candidates, and the story was I think a woman of South Asian background was constantly getting rejected, then changed her name on her exactly the same CV and everything to a anglicised name, and bingo, suddenly she was getting lots of interviews and that sort of thing. You can imagine, unless these things are sophisticated and getting to the point about, well, they're only as good as the data scientists who are developing the algorithms, and because we don't necessarily have a good understanding of what they're doing, and believe me, even though you sort of alluded to it's the best, hottest new thing to get involved in. Look, I've managed a few data scientists, and by God, they're bloody difficult to manage. They're riddled with anxiety and absolutely sticklers for precision. And what they fail to see is the grey. And I think it's getting back to, I guess, what Sean's talking about in terms of well, what's the real skill of but being in the legal profession? It's actually, a lot of it is about interacting with people and being able to understand people, and that's a fundamentally human thing. And I think what's going to happen, I use this recruitment thing as an example, you know, an example, because that's where we're going to see it, is in this sort of low level kind of pretty bodily, hastily constructed solutions that are designed to produce a commercial outcome quickly for, say, a recruitment firm or something like that. And whilst it might be efficient, might be good business for the firm, it's going to reinforce all of those kind of biases. And so we've got to be very careful about those impacts. And funnily enough, it could end up being a rich vein of work for real lawyers dealing with human problems as a result of pretty low level, pretty basic, sort of rudimentary developments in this space. Because remember, these are businesses, they'll operate from a low cost base, they'll try and drive as much out of their developers, but as soon as they start costing too much, they'll boot them out the door. So I think, you know, all of this talk about how machines are going to take over, how artificial intelligence is going to take over, I don't think, and sure, we've got, on a big scale, we talk about the power of Facebook and Google and even Coles and banks, and to have knowledge about what we are and who we are. I really think that there's not going to be one big machine that's going to sort of dictate all of this. And you're right, we still need to have that human element and that human discussion about how we are witnessing these biases play out, and be prepared to use the law, use regulation, use politics and the political theatre and the discourse to be able to influence and change and regulate in that space.
Mm-hmm. And Aaron, your thoughts about this, I guess this algorithmic bias piece, but indeed this idea of how, I don't know, how the technology in this, you know, where the liability is, let's say, those kind of questions around understanding, actually, is the algorithm inherently biased? Is the technology giving me something we can trust?
So I just, you know, continuing on from James's point, I think as lawyers we have a big opportunity to work in that grey space where the data scientists may not necessarily agree with, you know, what changes are required to the outcome because they have so much faith in the data. I think all of this is ripe for hacking and small amounts of hacking so far that little changes will take a long time to be realised, unless we as lawyers see that and you know, sort of educate people that this is where your potential liabilities may arise. And you know, as I understand the Russian hacking thing, it's simply that they had a whole bunch of people, you know, feeding particular biased news stories to particular segments of the population at particular times. So that's all that they're seeing on Facebook. So, you know, to my mind, all of this, we need to start thinking about it in more simple and fundamental terms. You know, the term AI and big data and machine learning sort of automatically brings you up to this sort of space of these massive computers and the unknown, where really it's just treating data in minute ways and in intelligent ways. And as lawyers, we have a big opportunity to figure out what those decisions made in between are, and how businesses you know, can think about that in the future. But I think that we have to bring ourselves back down to thinking about it in more realistic terms. You know, I think just 2 or 3 weeks ago I was reading that Facebook didn't announce as big a profit as what they thought they would, because they've had to employ a bunch of people to do their AI and to do their machine learning to make sure that their algorithms were producing the proper outcomes, because it's probably just a whole bunch of stuff sort of hacked together on the back end.
Yeah, and we just as a throwaway on that, we have machine learning AI in our platforms, and actually we have a whole bunch of people that test that the AI is delivering what we think it's going to deliver. We call it human relevancy testing, and people sit in rooms and just try and replicate it. So I can understand the kind of Facebook piece. I'm going to ask the last question, and we're going to go to the audience for 4 questions. So our last question really here is this big question, and we'll skip one, Max, and go to our final question, which is really about AI and human rights, because this is kind of where we're landing a little bit. Maybe it's a big landing, maybe it's a big jump to take. LexisNexis is working with the Human Rights Commission on a paper and some policy thinking actually in this space. There's a couple of bits of literature that we have if you want to grab that and see what's going on. But what about this idea of how AI or technology, could potentially pose a threat to human rights? Sean, this is a big question to ask you, but I'm going to give you the opportunity to give us your view on it.
Well, I think some of the examples you gave earlier where law enforcement or judicial officers are using AI to determine whether they're going to stop people, whether they're going to question them, whether they're going to search them. If they're then, they're found to have committed some sort of crime, they then go for a judge, and the judge then determines whether they're a flight risk, whether they're going to grant bail on the basis of a result spat out by a machine. I mean, there are pilots for that sort of thing happening around the world at the moment, and that's where some of these problems are coming up, and where they're realising that the base data that forms that is being used for the basis of these decisions is in fact because of its historical nature is inherently racist. So that clearly is impacting people's human rights. People are being judged on the basis of racist data, and decisions are being made about their rights. So yes, absolutely it can happen, and it is happening at the moment, no doubt about that. I guess the more interesting question then is around the use, let's say we've got automated vehicles. It's one that comes up all the time, that wonderful question of, well, what do you program an automated vehicle to do when you are the person driving it and the car is faced with the choice of running over 2 pedestrians or saving you? What is the right decision? And the right to the drive will be affected if the car prefers the 2 pedestrians, and vice versa. So yeah, the rights of the individuals are going to be affected by the decisions that are made by artificial intelligence. There's absolutely no doubt about it. The question then is who's responsible for it? And we already have at the moment it's going to be some combination of the car maker, just following on with my example, the programmers. It's probably not one program, it's probably several companies. There'll be insurance companies sitting behind it, So that is the obvious next step. If Tesla has a car accident, Tesla car has a car accident, the drivers might have some responsibility, Tesla might have some responsibility, the coders might have some responsibility, and ultimately the insurance company sitting behind are going to write a check. Can I foresee a time where artificial intelligence could be held responsible? Well, we already have companies being convicted of crimes, companies being found to be negligent, companies being forced to give compensation. The notion of a natural person and a legal person, we have that already, and we've lived with it for many, many years. Can I see it personhood being extended to AI? Absolutely. Will it make any difference if they have no money? No. So the question then is, if you're going to give responsibility to an artificial intelligence, a vehicle with artificial intelligence, let's just say, then that is absolutely useless to a litigant unless they are forced to have assets behind them, or some sort of insurance, or there's some sort of fund sitting behind it. But can I see it happening? Sure.
Okay. Just final couple of comments on this question from the panel, and then we'll open to questions.
Yeah.
If you could keep them brief.
Yeah, I'll just keep it very brief, and all I'll say is I think a lot of these I guess new platforms or disruptors like Airbnb, Uber, even though they're moving into AI space, particularly Uber, I think their whole record is about trying to avoid responsibility, and both in terms of passengers and drivers, and the throw their hands up in the air and say, but we're just a platform, and other people do stuff on it. I think that's where, getting to Sean's point about where this legal responsibility will end up lying, I think even at that kind of level, about opting out of employment obligations or liability for accidents and that sort of thing, that's potentially, I've got no doubt there'll be a series of, well, there's already happening, a series of test cases in this space, in these spaces that will start to tease out, you know, the liability of those kind of machines, and I've got no doubt there'll be some response, whether or not it's too early or too late. It will remain to be seen. But you know, in times like these and a question like that, it's time to pull out the classics and read Franz Kafka's The Trial. You know, get back into some George Orwell and get quite morose.
Thanks, James, on that bombshell. No, we'll finish with Aaron, your thoughts on this.
I guess I'll take the flip side, which is that, you know, if we use AI and machine learning and data and have processes and checks and balances, you know, leading into that, then we can create better baselines, better access to justice, hopefully more simple laws and legal processes, so that you don't also have that human bias. And someone from, you know, for example, a low socioeconomic background can have access to civil litigation, rights of recourse, or, you know, two people who present themselves to the court in a criminal matter and not judged upon the way that they present themselves or their looks or, you know, how nice a suit that they can afford to get to the court, and that's it. So I think that there's also a massive positive influence for the law. Again, if we think about it intelligently and diligently.
Thanks, Aaron. Okay, we've got about 10 minutes, I think, for questions from the audience. 5? No, 10. Well, we'll see how we go. Anyway, I'm sure there are questions that we're going to have from the group here. We don't have mics, right? I'm so sorry.
That's all right.
We'll repeat the questions if you like for the purpose of your video.
Not so much maybe a question, but an observation that we're at a point in time, and with every change that comes to humanity, we have a natural tendency to throw up a screen and place distance between us and the change. And I think this question of, even this last question, in August 2018 asking this, and in August 2019 asking it, and in August 2020 asking it, the poll may well change as we become more familiar with the changes that are coming with technology. And you go back to Industrial Revolution times, this is the era we're in, isn't it? You know, we are in the disruption era and we're in the technological kind of mainstream. And we're sort of all just being swept along with it. And I really love the optimism of the last comment, because I think really that's the best of humanity, where you meet change with optimism and you stay in control, and it's not that AI is going to take over unless we let it.
So on that point, I urge you to look up a Vice documentary called The Fourth Industrial Revolution. It is fantastic, and it speaks about a whole bunch of stuff like autonomous vehicles, and you know, it has truck drivers in Germany who have massive tablets in front of them and they're driving without their hands, and they end up in factories and they can realize how much stock is there. But the guy who runs this documentary, he's basically just speaking to a group the whole time, says that now is the time that we need to realize where we are and make plans for the future.
Yeah.
Because we're only going to harm ourselves and the environment that we live in if we continue down the path that we are, without making some significant changes and some very basic changes. And you know, so that one of my points is that, you know, everyone's sort of getting ahead of the themselves and speculating about the worst case scenario or the best case scenario without, you know, doing things in trial and error and testing. And I think that, you know, Australia, to my mind, doesn't have the tech expertise to do those quick tests where you know that you fail quickly and you learn quickly and you keep applying.
Thank you for that observation. Any other questions? Yes.
We're in a field, I think, law, where we deal with people, and people are so inherently unpredictable. There are, you know, apart from anything else, people just lie, if I can put it that way. And I just wondered, I guess, how much our current and our future AI and other technologies, how ready they are to deal with that inherent unpredictable. I know that there's that nature of machine learning that can deal with some of that, but is there ever going to be the capability for someone who says that I'm going to do X and then breaches that undertaking or things like that? How capable is our AI of dealing with that unpredictable nature of humans?
So the question was how capable is AI and machine learning, you know, tools? How capable are they of predicting, dealing with individuals and their having regard to the tendency to lie? I guess, as I understand it, and Aaron might be able to, you know, kind of put a more techie spin on this, but dealing with individuals, I think AI is, you know, will struggle. But when you look at individuals as one of a number of a very large group, I think AI starts getting very, very accurate, because people, you know, the tendency for people to lie will be the same across large groups. So. But the interesting thing as well about how technology is going to evolve is, you know, there is software being developed at the moment to be able to read people's facial expressions and tell whether they're lying on with a high degree of accuracy. So I can see in a courtroom not too far from now, we will have situations, or even I can imagine in an automated courtroom, and I was talking earlier to one of our deputy registrars from the magistrates courts here in the ACT, and the magistrates court, I can imagine at the time, not too far in the distance, where you sit down, you log your claim, you give your evidence to a computer screen, the AI determines whether you're lying or not, evaluates the evidence and gives you a decision, and you've not even spoken to a person. That's not too far off.
I have time for perhaps one more question, and then we'll keep the answers brief as we can. Or not. Yes, go
Do
ahead.
you think there is going to ever be an opportunity, especially with kind of, we said, the kind of quick development of AI and kind of processes, that the law or the government will to keep up with regulation? You kind of see with the data protection issue that governments are scrambling to kind of deal with it, but you've got quite large multinationals that are able to either litigate, to defend litigation or influence regulation. How does law even deal with it in that sense then?
Yeah, well, that drives me crazy. How like, you know, when Malcolm Turnbull came to power and he made a big song and dance about being the innovation, you know, prime minister, and it's going to be great. Parliament is the most antiquated. You know, their sole product is paper and reams of it, and they do it badly in the way that they process it. There's so many opportunities to open that kind of lawmaking to a far more iterative, consultative process where rather than it being sort of held to ransom in the Senate, as it constantly does, you know, these sort of exposure drafts, legislation can be open, machine readable, and can be tested against large data sets to determine actual impact and actual and be projected into the future. There's so many more opportunities to make sure that we are keeping pace, not only keeping pace with those sorts of evolution, but sort of keeping our politicians honest in the way that we make
fact-based decision making,
evidence-based decision making. Yeah, no, exactly. But I just think it's an astonishing irony that you know, I was reading something the other day that New Zealand, I think, is moving towards having open, machine-readable legislative structures. Just really simple innovations like that can really open our understanding and the world's understanding, rather than being this kind of closed cabal, and we can be a lot more responsive. And so that legislative making body, if you looked at it like how it should operate, which is there's a need, we've got to deal with that need quickly and efficiently, and we've got to be able to test that need quickly and efficiently, you'd redesign the whole thing.
But I mean, the law has historically lagged the development of technology and industry, and even society and cultural changes as well. That is the way the development of the law works. Even the common law and Parliament-made law, and that's not going to change. And as things get faster, it's going to seem like the lag is greater.
Yeah, I think the first step is to simplify. All of the acts and regulations are online now. I spend way more time than what I would like pouring through the Corporations Act and regulations. If we want to go down the path of smart contracts, and we want to go down the path of these technologies that do things automatically, then we need to fundamentally simplify things, because really AI is just a whole bunch of if-then statements. If X, Y, and Z.
So is legislation.
Exactly, and so that's why I think that there's a perfect match here for tech and law, because you're just rationalizing decision making and thinking logically about things. But when you have certain sections that don't make any sense and certain regulations that don't match the section, then it just gets out of hand. And I know certainly I've been involved in a few projects now where the stated outcome blows out of proportion because someone else wants this feature and someone else wants that feature, and by the end of it you achieve nothing because it's way too complicated for anyone to do in the time that they have available. So I think the first step is simplification, get your house in order, and then we can look to the future.
Thanks, Aaron. We're going to close it there, and I just think that the discussion was fantastic. It is an interesting space. Lots going on. I think whether you see it as seismic shifts or kind of marginal developments, I think no doubt advancement is coming and is upon us. And it's really interesting, in this space of complex software, maybe not quite as transparent as we would like it, questions of liability. In an industry or in a space where things like ethics and equality and transparency are absolutely at the heart of what we do, I think it is going to be a constant source of debate and good conversation and interesting development. So on that note, I'd just like to thank our panellists, Aaron, James and Sean. I think they're fantastic. As I said, we're going to compile the data itself of these kind of questions and other things from our survey and provide those out to everybody, I think, by email. Please join us. There is still wine, and I know there is nibblies coming. I heard something about small hamburgers that were on their way. I'm sure I heard that. So please stick around, and thank you so much for coming, everybody. Much appreciated. Thank you.
Yeah, 7:15. So boarding is 6:55. Yeah,
It's incredible. This is why this city is great.
The German government is excellent. It talks about all kinds of stuff.
this stuff, because that's my job is ethics, is that the ethics were addressed kind of obliquely. There's no kind of upfront thing. And you kind of hinted at in the 80s, a guy named Jim Rhodes, who was at Boston College, he wrote kind of Godfather of computer ethics. And he said, he wrote a paper on what computers should do. And he said they should do everything they do better than we do, except determine our values. And that makes sense. It's
a practical application of it.
Yeah. The tricky bit is being precise enough about what our values are and what it means to be human and all those kinds of things. And I think you kind of hinted at the dehumanization